We had- This might be what they try that everything. That's pretty wise. All right.
What's that? All right, thank you. Good morning. I'd like to call to order the February 20th, 2024 meeting of the Scarborough Economic Development Corporation. We do not currently have a quorum, so unless a couple people show up, we will have to postpone the approvals number 3 until a later time. Might just be too cold this morning, maybe. I don't know. Thank you, everyone who is here. Roundtable. I can just start by saying from one from Atlantic. Our branch is continuing to make a lot of progress. I think the location over near Cabela's is going to probably, their thinking might be open by April, maybe May at the latest. That it's been very smooth and it's gone well. From banking, lending, interest rates, there has not been much movement in a while, but we have seen a lot of lending requests, all different kinds of equipment, real estate purchases, business acquisitions. I think Helen talks a lot about business acquisitions, and we're really seeing a lot of those. It's funny how many people are now. Someone has worked at a company or a small business for 5 years and is now talking with the owner, about buying it. That's sort of our most common, what we see the most of it. We're seeing an uptick in that. We're doing a lot with the SBA. So we've been busy. I mean, I think rates have not, no one really knows. I think people still expect a couple rate cuts in 2025, but no one really knows for sure. But we're busy. We're seeing a lot of activity.
We've had a very busy start to 2025 compared to last year, night and day compared to last year. We are seeing it from all sectors. In particular, probably the most interesting to me is there are 3 private manufacturing projects of note, of decent size, that we're pursuing at this time. I mean, we haven't seen anything like that since before the pandemic. We've got a number of multifamily projects that have shown up. Some of them are dusting off plan from before the pandemic. They're all in the communities that they're a part of. Almost all of them are approved projects, and some of it is kicking the tires to see how prices are. And Tom, I was sharing with Tom before, the threat of the tariffs is in particular, probably more so for us, the Canadian tariffs is impacting things with the price of steel and the price of lumber most affected. So there's a lot of uncertainty in the market. We picked up 3 new projects, all of which have federal funding. So we've been awarded the projects. One we are starting, and that is NIH funded at Jackson Lab. We were very excited. We were the award contractor for the Maine Center for the University of Maine system, which is the old law school, the new law school down in the Old Port. And it's a major renovation that has some NIST funding, National Institute of Science and Technology. And we are the award contractor for the PFAS project at the University of Maine. And that is, that was heavily, you probably read it in the paper, and Susan Collins and Angus King brought in a boatload of money to make that happen. But there's just uncertainty on all of that, given given what's going on in Washington. So overall, it's been a very busy start to the new year. And that, so that's always a positive. Next week's the Merida Conference. I was up at the Maine Hospital Association Conference at Sunday River last week, and a lot of concern for the financial state of the smaller hospitals up north. And but overall, we've just been busy. So, and just around town, the two hotels, the one on Mussey Road, the one on Payne Road, those are progressing right along.
Right.
And they've really made a lot of progress for the winter on the Eight Corners. The housing at Eight Corners. But those are the three that you really notice around town.
Yeah.
And,
Can I ask just on the projects that have federal money that have been awarded, which is, you mentioned two, right? Is there worry that even the ones that have been awarded could get clawed back, or what's the sense of that?
they're just not knowing.
Okay.
Yeah, just not knowing. We have already started like the initial kickoff meetings for both projects,
Okay.
but it's just the not knowing part that because you read the paper just like I do.
Right. Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
because it does look like they're stopping contracts that have already been awarded too. So
Yeah,
I just wasn't sure how people feel about
I
that.
think Senator Collins's office is gonna be very busy. And you saw it with Acadia, I mean, there was this blanket, no more funding, all, but, no seasonal hiring for national park. I mean, all these things. And then, Senator Collins, who is now chair of the Appropriations Committee, called the, Secretary of the Interior and was like, no, Acadia is fine, you can go hire people.
Well,
So I have a feeling that all these projects that people are worried about are gonna, have her
but my,
try and see if she can
Yeah.
push them through,
I just want to make sure I understand though, on the national parks, she's getting the temporary back, but the 8 full-time staff still have not been hired back. Yeah, okay, just double checking because okay,
Yeah, just on the point, we're on the verge of awarding a contract to repair Black Point Road, which was damaged a year ago last month.
oh yeah,
That's 9% FEMA funded, which normally would be a slam dunk.
Yeah.
But our attorneys are suggesting language, I haven't seen it yet, in the contract that I think it's gonna have a chilling effect on the bidding climate. Our funding source is uncertain. It's amazing that we say that when it's FEMA, this is typically that stuff is guaranteed. So that's just an example of how it's coming to roost here. The other one that has the same sort of effect is that DOT is going to be intended to submit a protect grant, $50 million grant to rebuild Route 1 across the marsh. And that grant program is officially paused. What that means, how long that is. The deadline for that grant, I think, is February 20th. So we'll have to see, but just everything is up in the air.
right. Is that an MMA function about lobbying or making an accounting of how many grants are potentially at risk?
I think you're shouting in the wind.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
I think it's an exercise worth doing, that we
Yeah.
really take stock in what's happening. I'm not sure who's gonna listen to it and what effect
Right.
it's gonna have, frankly.
Hmm.
I mean, you see some of the actions at the federal level, they're just these sweeping changes, and then within hours, certainly days, they're reinstating critical employees that, they cannot be retained. So I don't think there's much
Okay.
forethought in terms of the effects. And
I
that's my
was-
personal opinion.
I was surprised last week. I met with a commercial realtor, and I was not expecting the whole thing of, it's all uncertainty, but the threat of more inflation possibly raising interest rates, like, it's, it's just that people don't know what's going on, and we have no control of it. And that, I think, it just kind of surprised me, the response I got from someone that I really kind of didn't expect it from.
So a couple things from my perspective, the town enjoyed a bond rating upgrade last month. Good news. So Moody's rating service moved us up one more grade. We've got 2 to prime, so we're certainly in high investment grade.
Great.
We did that leading up to just a fairly small bond issue, fairly routine, just less than 4 million, and got a rate of 3.25. So it's a very attractive rate. And I mentioned that in part one, I'm just proud of the fact that we actually got an upgrade. It's very hard, particularly when you get into this upper level. The sorts of things to move up a notch are huge. And this has been a sustained effort over probably most of my tenure here. So really pleased to finally.
Is there any time limit on that, or are you there until something brings you down?
There until the next rating.
Yeah.
We typically are going back to rating agencies every year.
Oh, okay.
Every other at the most.
Yeah.
The fundamentals are strong, so I don't expect any backslide. But I think the next step is even harder to attain. So what's really important about that is obviously we're at the doorstep on some major capital investments at some point with a school solution. Saving even a tenth of a point is a big deal, over $100 million. So just pleased that we're kind of setting ourselves up well in that regard. On that front, I've been actively involved in this 3rd round of school building advisory committee. We're meeting at this point every week, every Monday. It's a 3 to 4 hour session. The work is picking up quickly, and there's a lot of it. You might recall the effort last spring produced 4 options, and admittedly that committee, everyone had hoped that they'd come up with a singular solution. It was pretty obvious that with a committee of 70 and some very strongly held views, rather than upsetting the success I think we had by convening a lot of people with different opinions, we thought it would be best just to kind of carry that through and then pick it up with a more concise team and professional support to help them really discern among the 4. Those 4 swelled to 7. Consultants brought 3 other options, which is not a bad thing. I mean, it seems like we're going backwards to go forward, but I think it's worthwhile that the professionals actually brought 3 more solutions. We're now down to 5 and need to get to at least 2 at some point in the next 3 weeks or so.
Tom, was that, because I did the survey last week online, and I saw more than 4. I didn't know it was 7, but are the results of the survey done? I mean,
No, it's still got a couple of weeks up there. I don't remember the exact dates, but end of the month. And if you took the survey, if you haven't, I encourage you to. It does take a little time.
Oh, yeah,
15 or 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I think what you'll find, at least my experience was, it's not a traditional survey in that just because where we are in the process, it's really hard to ask very specific and granular questions. So it's as much an educational piece about what's in front of the committee right now. I honestly don't expect the results will produce really tangible actionable results, if you will, but I think it's another data point, demonstrates the community we're engaging them. The full intent is to do a second survey when we have no more than 2 options, where we can be a lot more specific about this or that. Ideally, we would also have a site in mind, and we would ask some questions around that piece, because our surveying after the failed referendum suggested pretty heavily the site we chose was one of the factors that doomed that, at least in the eyes of some. So site matters. That's the piece I'm most actively involved with. So we started that process with 22 sites, and that was essentially just looking across the town. We widened the geographic kind of net, if you will, The last time, I think it was within a mile of the central campus, and so that in itself limited us significantly. We've broadened it kind of townwide, so 22 was the initial cut, and now down to 9. Our consultants are running those sites through pretty detailed evaluation matrix to see how they rate on all the major factors, access and, all those sorts of things. So that's kind of running a parallel track. I'm anxious about this because just having gone through it last time, even once we select a site, then we need to come to terms with the owner and do due diligence. So all of that needs to get ramped up quickly, and that's going to take some time and effort over the spring for sure. The last thing, well, two things. The Downs kind of dominated planning board this week. Not surprising. Really focused on their town center component. I think this is the third amendment to the subdivision plan. The good news is they worked through and got approval on some major, I won't say sticking points, but their access roads and further layout. And all of this is really critical to the market basket project, which is where it is. So be working through planning board to secure approval this spring. And last thing, council passed its goals last night. I had mentioned earlier, but just for the benefit of everyone, conspicuously, economic development really isn't mentioned. Maybe a passing reference. I don't know that that was intentional. So I bring up to this group, obviously, for obvious reasons. So don't take offense to that. I think there's still importance in economic development. I think some of it might be, oh, the Downs is just a juggernaut and it's going to keep doing what it does. That's not everything I think we need to be thinking about for sure. And that's why I love to be part of this conversation. I will say, though, I think there's a lot of opportunity in the goals for SEDCO, particularly in the area of housing. There's a goal to create a comprehensive housing strategy. And I think this group could be very helpful in really driving the point home about the connection between economic development and housing. That's a piece that I think gets glossed over and not fully appreciated. And Karen well enough that I think there's some good data that we can probably surround around that just to kind of cement it in place.
Well, I think, I spoke to this a little bit at the All Board Summit. And this was a follow-up. This is something I took from meeting at Piper Shores, was that I think some people, you think economic development and you just sort of think jobs and businesses or new buildings and things like that. And I think what I thought was a big theme of our meeting at Piper Shores was that all these other things are required for it. And, you need housing, you need school, the school needs to be addressed, the housing needs to be addressed. I mean, you got to have good schools and you got to have housing to attract people and attract, and attract the companies that you want. So I agree that I think it's sort of, I think, how you define economic development, but I think there's a lot of, there's a lot of things that are needed for economic development that I think we can take a role
My
in.
simple point to you is that I think there will be critical discussions and decisions made this year that I think this SEDCO can and should play a good role. School solution, we as a community need to come out unified in support. This thing is paralyzing almost everything else.
The current understanding of economic development, it's less about the fancy, advertising and things like that. The biggest thing you can do for economic development is to have your house in order within your municipality. I mean, it's all of that adds up to making a fertile ground for businesses to grow, and that's dealing with housing, dealing with infrastructure, all the things that are within the realm of the municipality, making that a holistic package. That's what attracts businesses. It's the old, businesses invest in communities that invest in themselves. So, as we've just all said, and as it's in our strategic plan, everything is economic development at this point. And it's just a matter of making sure we're looking at the holistic picture.
Yeah, in my previous my municipal experience, and I'm not sure if this point is entirely applicable where we are in Scarborough right now, but um, it has struck me that how important, how a community takes care of its schools in particular, um, is this direct barometer or reflection of its values. And I've been impressed with, particularly when businesses are making decisions which community to go to, those sorts of things matter, right? They kind of look into your soul and say, is this a place we want to invest in?
Right.
So it sounds a little superficial, but I think it's super important. You know, beyond that, I think it's just you couldn't spend our money in any better way.
We'll say, in December, I had the opportunity to go and help facilitate a discussion with Cape Elizabeth businesses. And it struck me as I'm listening.
Three of you in that conversation?
Now, it's more than that. There was a group of very frustrated businesses, and it reminded me of where Scarborough was like 15 years ago, where businesses felt like they didn't have, like, the processes weren't smooth, they weren't efficient, they were not politicized, but certainly they didn't understand how decisions were made. And it struck me very much that that's what I was hearing from the businesses, in Cape Elizabeth. They're like, we can't get anything done. The process is stacked against us, and lots of different frustrations. And I think that's, like I said, it just struck me that
There's some issues in
Yeah.
Cape right now.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Systemic, like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Exactly. And again, I think we addressed some of those issues long ago, and so we're just at this next level of making the investments that make our community stronger.
Yeah, I think it's probably, I wouldn't say Scarborough 15 years ago, I'd say Scarborough 50 years ago, or 25 years ago.
I'm just thinking about all the surveys and things like that of businesses and what they were frustrated about back in
Oh, when
2010.
when I started,
Sure.
Yeah.
I think the pendulum's swung.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Scarborough got a little full of itself and said, we've got enough. We
Yeah.
don't really need you. We're not going to bend over backwards, much
Mhm.
less do anything to help.
Right.
And then we worked very hard to kind of reverse that
Yeah.
image.
Yeah.
oh, yeah.
That's it.
Now, thank Tom.
First of all, I want to apologize to the committee that I was not able to make the summit at Piper Shores. I have some issues that I have to deal with from a personal side of things and needed to be attentive to those.
Yeah, we changed the meeting time on you.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other side of things is what's been happening with me lately has really slowed me down. And so I don't really have a lot to offer at this meeting, just I haven't been out much. It's- I am starting to move around, things are better. I can actually go up and down stairs now without worrying much anymore. So I really don't have anything to add.
Like the light industrials.
Yeah.
You can say no if you don't want to.
Well, no, I think that, for the last 4, possibly 5 months at long range, that meeting has pretty much been consumed by discussions surrounding the light industrial zone. That's going on right now, which basically has to do with the old racetrack, Beach Ridge Speedway.
Mm,
And what is happening there, obviously, the planning board passed FedEx coming into that area. And that has created a lot of local concern to that area. And we've had some folks coming in that have been very strong in voicing their opinion to the zone. Which my understanding is that we passed that zone right around 2013, I believe. And that was actually due to
the 2006 comprehensive plan for that area. And so we implemented what came out of the 2006 plan back in 2013. Not a whole lot happened to my knowledge. Tom, you might be aware of other stuff that was going on, but it's remained pretty quiet until FedEx.
Until Speedway closed. and
Yeah.
so-
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then things started to happen. Well,
I'm sorry, so that area was already zoned appropriately for FedEx.
correct.
Yes,
Okay, but now,
Yeah, it has been for 10 years.
now,
Yeah.
now, of course,
Right.
FedEx comes and people are.
up in arms.
Right. Well, the other thing too, and now it comes to personal preferences, I guess, which when you look at what's going on to the local area and to the people, FedEx kind of like almost took it to the max, right? Because it's a 24/7, 365 operation. Lighting for parking lots, trucks backing up and the backup alarms and that's around the clock. I mean, so it's not limited, if you will, to certain types of movement or uh time of day kind of items. So the council put a moratorium in place to see what they want to do now due to the uproar, if you will, of the people in that area. And at our last meeting, we kind of came to some consensus that what we needed to do was to look at proposing to the ordinance committee and then eventually to the council that there be some changes in what could be allowed in the future going into that without totally changing the fact that it's LI, the light industrial area. We also want to take a look at the types of businesses that are going in there, maybe see if we can do something by limiting hours of operation, things of that nature to try to help the residents understand that we as a town understand some of their concerns and we're doing what we can within the limitations that are in front of us to try to help impose some tighter restrictions to make it a little bit more amenable to the people who are living in that
And
area.
someone wanted to revert back
Yeah.
to rural farming.
Yeah.
And thankfully, I don't think that's ever been given consideration. So the end result from long range and now ordinance committee has
Yep.
basically adopted what was recommended. It does remove, I think, 3 or 4 permitted uses, a couple cannabis related ones, warehouse and distribution, and
Yep.
one other one escapes me. More equally important, it also proposes a fairly stringent set of performance standards that businesses that would locate there would apply to, one of which, maybe the most important of which, is the 24-hour operation aspect.
Right.
The moratorium, is that going, anything new?
It was done, it expires.
Mid-March.
Mid-March, yeah.
I mean, it didn't impact the FedEx project, did it?
No,
But it didn't. The way it was written, it could be retroactive. It could have retroactively put it in. It did not.
Retroactive stuff, it's me. Nervous.
Yeah, and what I would say from an economic development standpoint. Listen, the industrial vacancy rate is in Scarborough is less than 1%. Not much better the rest of the area. So there's going to be continued demand for industrial space. What is important, I think, less about any individual use, and I'm trying to let go of, cherry picking uses, but to be clear about what's going to happen there. We don't want to go back and fight this light industrial area every year because on either side, there's some folks that own land there that wanted more stuff, did not want some of the restrictions, and there's still a small group of residents on that in that area that, given their druthers, they would want it to return to residential. So my hope is the one thing I want out of this is to say this is settled for at least the near term, and I don't know that it will be, but
Yeah.
that would be, that'd be my hope.
My suspicion is that will be settled for the foreseeable future. I think what we are likely to be next talking about is the Running Hill District.
Mhm.
And that really came up as an outgrowth of the '06 plan. It was like industrial, one of the final implementation pieces. I'm not sure the CPIC committee consciously kept those to the end. They just happened to be kind of the final two pieces to implement. And that's an area that nothing's really happened, but it had the same sort of 10-year vintage. The majority of the property is owned by Waterstone, who's certainly capable of doing a lot of fairly intensive mixed use development. So I think that's a conversation that's likely to come
Right.
this year that this group might want to be involved with.
Yeah.
The other one is,
Mussey Road,
what's that?
right, that's Mussey Road.
No, it's Gorham Road and Running Hill Road.
Oh, excuse me.
Rondon land.
Yeah,
Excuse me, yeah.
There's like 140 acres. More-
That's just for that one lot,
That's
but there's
one.
more
Yeah.
in the area.
The other one that the council may wade into, it's a deep discussion, is just generally about our RF zone, which imposes maybe 2/3 for a town. And essentially everything works with the council, they can certainly pockets on this side as well. That's a deeper, more complicated discussion,
Right.
likely, but I think that's in our future as well.
Did come up at the All Board Summit,
yeah.
that we should diversify in there.
From a density perspective, the Running Hill zone is probably some of the most aggressive zoning we actually have in town. In terms of building height, in terms of,
Can only be crossroads.
Yeah.
And it's a close second.
and
Yeah.
some, and everything primarily is being held back because of public water and sewer.
Mhm.
And what, if anything, and when will anything happen in that area? And at the time that CPIC was going through the process, we had really kind of hoped that we were going to get some support in that area from Westbrook coming down. I forget what they call that road,
Cummings Road.
Cummings Road. And we thought there might be able to be some extension from Westbrook, and that just isn't going to happen, to my knowledge, at least
Right.
not in the near future.
And not because Westbrook doesn't want to, but because they don't have
It's
capacity.
capacity, yeah,
They're fighting with Gorham for the state.
Yeah.
yeah.
Westbrook, if they
So-
had the capacity, would be perfectly, my last discussion, which was probably 2 years ago, they're like, we're agnostic. We'll take customers wherever we can get them, but we just don't have anything. That was literal. Don't quote me on
The
that.
possibility for sewers to send it to South Portland.
Yep.
But there's a number of private lines, and I don't know how that came to be, but Target, Anthem, those are all private sewer lines, and so to connect to them, you've got to do a deal, make a private deal, and that I think will be challenging.
Right.
So the solution is for it to come under the turnpike. And
Yeah.
be sent to our plant,
Right,
which is expensive.
right. And that's also was a discussion that the council talked about having for Running Hill Road, but I can't remember. Is that still in the goals?
I don't think that is.
Not specifically.
And that's another place where it's just,
Hmm.
if you look at the zoning ordinance, it's like, whoa, this is great. And so we've had so many people come with ideas about the area, but it gets stopped when they get to the sewer. And it's not like people won't invest, but it's like, I'm gonna guess 12 to 16 million now, because it was 4 million like 10 years ago. So,
The other uncertainty there is just the Gorham connector, whether you look at access road, the interchanges, all that.
Yeah.
Weights pretty heavily on some potential use of.
yeah.
So,
Thank you, Alan.
oh, yeah.
She had plenty to contribute. I think what you're experiencing is perfectly normal. I was very lucky on my knee replacement that I had my first 8 weeks of recovery, there was no snow. I could walk
Oh,
down
yeah.
the street, it was,
Yeah.
Yes,
and it was perfect conditions to be able to
Yeah.
recover. And it been anything but since the first part of February.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's up for lost time.
Yeah, a winter we haven't had for years. So I just have two things. One, just specifically to Piper Shores is we are working on a new strategic plan. And part of that strategic plan is looking at growth and development. The Meadows has been an incredible success for Piper Shores and honestly, I think for the town. And we are going to start looking at what's next for us in the next probably 3 to 4 years. Um, the Meadows took us 5 to 6 years to develop, so we're not too soon to do that. Ideally, we would love to be close to where we are or, stay in Scarborough, but to be honest, we are looking at potential other areas for growth. And we don't know what that growth is going to look like. And it could be a different concept. Is it affordable housing? Is it, for seniors? Is it what we're doing right now? Is it higher levels of care or is it just independent living? So I think there's just a lot of conversation and I just wanted to share that with the group that those conversations are happening and we are starting to do some outreach and starting to look at that. So kind of exciting for the organization. And because the Meadows was such a success, I think we can go into it with a little bit of experience and understanding what to expect.
For that workforce housing, is it really for the employees or just in general?
Well, for workforce
Yes.
housing, yeah, I mean, that's certainly part of our conversations, whether we do that on site. And obviously there would have to be a lot of conversations about that. Would we partner with someone to provide that? I don't know. I mean, again, we're in such beginning stages. I don't, I mean, I see our next iteration in some form of partnerships.
Mhm.
I don't think anyone can do these things alone anymore. So whether it's partnering with the town, partnering with another, Maine Health, something like that, those are all possibilities for sure. So sort of a clean slate and then
Nice.
looking at what's next and being mindful too of what the town needs and what the town wants as well. So that's all kind of exciting. The other thing we were talking about grants. So Piper Shores, we have a resident who is very involved with Camp Ketcha and the Ketcha Outdoors and the Scarborough Land Trust for a grant from the Maine Bureau of Parks and Recreation. And it is to enhance the Libby River Preserve, Pepper Shores trails and Ketcha Outdoors trails to make it either more multi-generational or more handicap accessible. Those are kinds of things that we are looking at.
Mm.
So the question I think is going to be whether this grant program will even exist, based on how much of it is from federal funding. I don't know.
Pretty good. My guess is it's predominantly the bonds we all approved last fall.
Yeah.
Trails.
Yeah.
I think it's state.
I think
local.
it's, so there's still a lot of initial work. The three organizations are coming together to try to figure out the proposal.
Do you remember the state who the resident is, just so I.
Yeah, Rob Center.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and he has incredible experience with trail development. He started a canoe company in Vermont that still exists. And so, yeah, he's a good choice for that.
Andrew, just in terms of Piper Shore's next step, I appreciate well, I've been impressed with what you've shared on the demand side. And now you're trying to figure out how to kind of meet that demand. What does that actually mean in terms of the product type, right?
Right.
And correct me if I'm wrong here, but as I recall, you said the Meadows, prior to that, you had a waiting list of 150-ish. Filled up immediately, and now you've got a waiting list of 300 or something.
Over 320. Yeah.
So it's not as if you satisfy the demand, it's insatiable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it just continues to grow, so, and there is a saturation point where we people, I mean, if we're at 10+ years to get in, people will not come. I mean, that no one, very few think that far ahead in their retirement. So, so we really,
Well, 320.
yeah.
And these guys are signing up, they're putting money.
They're
down,
putting
right? I mean,
significant money,
they're making-
significant money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
making a hard commitment.
Yeah. So, um, I think, and one of the things I think I mentioned at the workshop was that, you know, we have, um, uh, a younger clientele that is coming in, that they are making these decisions or sooner. So, which I think only helps the town and the state, honestly, to be able to attract younger folks. So there's a lot, and we really are committed to some kind of growth. So I think that it's just going to be interesting to see how that evolves. But we certainly want to have a really good relationship with the town and with all of the committees that might be involved to make sure that we do it right again.
Andrea, I think you were at that conference like 10 years ago when they talked about the cliff.
Yeah,
Are we at the cliff now? It was the cliff of retirees. Just all of a sudden this.
yeah. I
surge
mean,
in demand.
you have a
Yeah.
huge nationally, a huge number of people retiring every day. And there's not enough housing for everyone. And so, yeah, so I mean, the question is, what can people afford? You know, and the building right now may be good because rates are low and things like that, but with the tariffs and everything, who knows, you know, how that's gonna impact development. So,
I mean, there's a documented national phenomenon where a lot of the boomers are still in their
Right.
3,000 square foot single
Oh,
family
yeah.
home.
Yeah.
They're living in 1,000 square feet of it,
yeah,
myself included.
Yeah.
But you get a low rate or no rate.
no way,
There's
yeah.
no place to go. And
Yeah.
so,
But then that is then preventing,
right, there's
The-
a bottle,
the
there's a
next-
bottleneck.
yeah,
For
because
sure.
that's then preventing the generation behind you from moving into that, someone moving, leaving their starter
Well,
home
and there's
into a
the sandwich
3,000.
generation still,
Yeah.
like, right, we've got kids and parents that we're still managing, and so, yeah, I mean, I think, honestly, I think the the future of retirement living and retirement housing has to shift.
Yeah.
It has to. So, because we can continue to build, honestly, but if you think about 20 years ahead, what the population declines. And so then you're gonna have all these empty places, and that's not what you want either. So,
Just a quick aside, I'm part of the school building. Not surprisingly, they're looking at future school enrollment as part of the
Right.
conversation, and birth rates is a major part of that, and then there's a model built out that's, you know, has additional layers on top of that. Scarborough had this unique, and Karen knows this all too well, bubble in 2020 and 2021. The theory is it's COVID related or pandemic related, but I think our live births went up to 207, interestingly, back to back. Whereas historically we're in the 165 to 170 range, and we've kind of fallen back to that. And so that's been a big part of the conversation. Kind of fascinating is that just a bubble? Is that gone? But the fact is, those kids are born and are presumably still here, and they're coming. They'll be kindergartners in 27. And do you manage that just as a bubble through the system? Yeah, or do you plan or you know, so I personally think that there's this phenomenon that we can't quite track, which is a lot of housing stock is kind of tied up. And when that sells, it's going to sell to younger folks and families with kids.
well, and it's sort of like the chicken or the egg. So we have seniors moving in, their kids are following them, or you have kids that move here and the parents are following them. So it's
More
like,
of that, the latter.
yeah,
The kids moved here. And
Yeah, and the
retired.
parents are following, yeah. So,
Housing is unbelievable. I mean, we've thought about downsizing for a long time and we've decided not to,
yeah,
but we're actively looking for my son and his family right now.
Oh, yeah.
They're in Spain. And they're trying to move back because my daughter-in-law just became commander of the clinic at Portsmouth Naval Shipyard.
Mm.
And we're looking at 1,800 square foot housing in southern Maine. And it's starting 20-year-old houses that have not been updated
Mhm.
are starting at 700 and up.
Yeah.
And it's unbelievable.
You should sell your house to your son.
But, yeah.
You know, if it wasn't about an hour's ride, it would have happened.
Mm.
But it's like, it's, the market's gone crazy.
I was gonna say, it's worse in Portsmouth. In Portsmouth itself, it's just like unreal. It's higher than
It's
Portsmouth.
interesting, just, personally, we built out a attached two-car garage for my mom. It's a 700 square foot, accessory dwelling unit, fully self-supporting. That's where my wife and I live, definitely, not by choice, it's just that's where we gravitate to. It's a little cozier space. We get 3,000 square feet, and we have the clean and heat, and, find where the dog's sleeping.
Workforce housing. Workforce housing. Anyway, that's what I have. Mhm,
Very good, discussions,
mhm.
not easy. So we cannot do the approval.
Yep.
So, do you wanna?
I'll entertain
Budget?
questions if anybody has any questions or.
I thought the information in the packet answered those.
Okay. So
Was there
on,
was there anything needed for the budget discussion? No?
yeah, just to point out a couple of things, just to make sure. I think I did it in the email. Really, it's a level set. The biggest issue or the biggest change, other than staffing, which the town really sets, it really is this issue of the audit. And we
Bless you.
we are sadly still waiting for the audit from our new auditors, which has led me to believe that they might not be the right selection for us for next time. And
Who's the auditors this time? Well, I mean, who, you know
um,
what I'm saying?
yeah, let's just
Yeah.
because I'm sure there's a good reason. So we'll deal with that when I get their product. But the efficiency would be, Norm, our finance director, said, why don't you think about using the town's auditor, and then they could package it all up. And that makes a lot of sense to me.
The library's doing that, or they're at least considering.
Yeah, it's gonna be more expensive, but the town's paying for it anyway, and I think that it would certainly make Norm happy, which I'm all about. I'd like to make the town's finance director happy. And, they're very efficient, and then you've got one person looking at all of these pieces. And as an executive director, I'm thrilled to have that done by the town's auditor.
But this would be independent.
Yeah,
It doesn't have to be
exactly.
the same firm, there should be separate contracts, independent audits.
Exactly.
I think it makes sense.
Yeah, but they would, certainly understand, the municipal world. That does come with an increased price. So Norm's current estimate is about $5,000, whereas we've been, um, paying really around 2,800, or 2,200, something like that. So it's an increase. I think that's up to I don't think we're going to get a better deal. And I think the certainty of having someone that can perform this for us at a time that syncs with the town's audit makes a lot of sense. And I would even say this may be one of those things that, if you recall, our budget is weirdly complicated for a small agency. So the town does all of our staffing and personnel, so they do the paychecks, they do all that processing. I would say it might make sense to put the audit in there unless that violates some piece, but if you put it there, then whatever that cost, the town is already taking that efficiency. So if it's on our side, we're not quite sure what that cost is going to be, then we may have to return funds to the town. So I say put it in the town expense side.
Yeah, I guess so you're looking at an increase of about $2,200.
Yeah, 2,800 for that line. Yes.
What? You said it was gonna go from 2,800 to
Yeah,
5,000, right?
2200, sorry, I misspoke. I was looking at the wrong column. It's an increase of 2,800 if
Oh,
it's,
Okay,
yes,
so
if
it's an
it's,
increase, okay. Is that expense one that, where do the funds usually come from for that expense?
right now it's come out of our operating budget,
Okay,
Which is supported by that.
which is supported. Yeah, it's a matter of the town's paying for it one way or another. It's just a matter of what pocket it
I
comes
just like
from.
to suggest that, as an independent organization, that you continue to carry and call it out separately.
Okay,
Though the funding to support it comes from us, I think it's important for you
Yeah.
to demonstrate, the independence.
so, but it's nothing that you'll submit this budget to the town
right,
and they'll either, they'll approve it.
right.
And that
I'm gonna slash it first.
that's where that extra money will, it's nothing that we don't have to fundraise for.
I'm not fundraising for our auditor.
Usually doesn't go.
No, yeah, but you're right. So and that, Tom, that's the way it's presented now. And
Keep it that way.
okay. All right. So that's the biggest expense. There's a little bit of change to the MMA. Subscriptions have gone up a little bit. We had a little extra. We pay MMA out of two categories. One is the one under MMA is really our insurance and some other expenses that we pay them to do. And then there's a subscription that allows us to be members or associate members of MMA in order to allow them to do these things. So there's a little fluctuation there. We had more in one column and less in the other, so we just smoothed it out a bit and moved things around. The town doesn't actually require the submission. This is for you guys. We just give them really what's down below. Marketing is going to stay the same. I anticipate keeping the Placer AI subscription at least for one more year.
Karen, what's under expenses? What's this line item that's
There was
standalone?
That's a question I had for the town. I'm guessing is that family leave?
The under long-term disability?
Yeah.
There's a
38.
blank.
Yeah, that's for both of
1,038.
us. So I put that's in the town's
That's what
personnel.
HR populated.
Yes, and so I submitted a question earlier this week to say, what do I call this extra line? Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense, the FMLA.
Yeah, that's what I'm guessing.
That makes sense.
That
makes sense. Because that's the new item.
Yeah, yeah.
Half percent of,
So, yeah,
5%.
Right. And
is that what you decided?
yeah, it's certainly a little increase here or there.
Yeah, makes sense. $200,000 in staffing costs.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
So I'm just waiting for that confirmation. There also the fiscal year 2025 budget in here is really a combination of what we had budgeted. Plus, I updated a couple of real costs that I already know, so it looks a little bit different from the budgeted. And what I did is I put in the revenues that we generated earlier this year as far as sponsorship, and then the actual costs of the event. So things look a little bit different than the original budget, and that'll be fine. I'm waiting for it, a little confirmation from the town on a where we are on staffing. So again, the other than staffing and personnel expense increases, which is 15,000. The rest of it is really the audit
Mhm.
expense.
Mhm.
And then, Tom, I don't know, do you want to talk a little bit about the change? Because right now we're really being paid for out of the Higas Parkway Tax Increment Financing District. Which doesn't really mean anything to us. That's the town's choice of where they put us in terms of the budget. But Tom is going in with some proposed amendments to that budget with the council. And one of the things that we've put in there long term, we threw in a little I think, Tom, did you go ahead and put 5 million in for loan program?
I put something in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's not for this year, but the program budget is for the life of the district. So we threw in some additional funds. I shouldn't say throw in. We deliberately put in some extra funding so that we could really think about a loan program in future years.
That's great.
That's great.
Karen, this is being extremely nitpicky, but in the bottom, in the blue where it says expenditures,
Mhm.
should that third column over be FY 2024?
It should be. Thank you. I did not make that edit. That is thank you.
And just verify the numbers are 24.
Yeah, they are. I know I forgot to change the title there.
No, Karen, this doesn't need to be voted on today or anything.
It doesn't, I need to submit it to Tom
Yep.
tomorrow. I think we could probably do a vote via email to get a full quorum. But I think as long as, it's a reasonable piece, we're not doing anything significantly different.
I mean, I don't know about anyone else. I think it's reasonable. Yeah, absolutely. I have no
Mhm.
concerns with it.
No,
Okay.
When's your next scheduled meeting?
Not till March. So I'll put out an email vote, which we're allowed to do in our bylaws.
Okay.
And then it's never finished until Tom's done with it. So it's,
Yeah, it'd be great to have.
I mean, and where are Tom's kickback?
my Tom's kickback. We're kidding, for the record.
it's part of the fundraising.
Right.
Thanks.
Right here.
So, yes, you guys see a little bit of trifling in here, and we don't usually reapprove the budget once it goes to the town, but there tend to be a little shuffling around once the town gets done. So if that's comfortable with everyone, I will put it out this afternoon to a full vote with that explanation. And I'll try to find the blank, make sure that is family leave.
And you'll fix the thing that
Yes.
Alan found down there. Yeah, okay, great.
I have an email into
Okay.
them, so.
So we've got, anything else on the budget, Tim?
Nope,
Okay, so we've got, a half hour left. And, looks like there's, 3 or 4 topics. I think number 2 is very important, so I guess I'll sort of let you take us through them, but
Sure.
just try and,
sure.
get that
The
left.
Yeah, the CEA strategy for the policy was passed by council last night with some additional revisions. It's a complex strategy, to say the least. And I think
Not really strategy, it's a process.
that's true. It's a
Right.
process. It's that's probably the biggest issue I think out there is the policy as printed, I think represents more of a how do you do it? It doesn't really represent a why do you do it or what we're trying to solve. And that was one of the questions that I think certainly some of the public had. It's like, well, okay, but what does this mean? Should we be doing affordable housing? Should we be doing all of these things? And there's a certain segment of the market that absolutely thinks we should not be doing affordable housing. I think the council is pretty has answered that question. We will be doing they are open to doing affordable housing. And then in their goals, they have that as a goal. What does it mean? What is affordable housing and workforce housing? What do we want to achieve from a policy perspective? And you know, the current CEA policy has lots of stuff in it, but it doesn't say who or what or why or how much we want to do. So that's really the council's prerogative for each year, what they want to, if they want to set some goals around that. But that was passed last night. So the biggest issue, the biggest change of that is the policy now applies to both the economic development and housing credit enhancement agreements. Next is probably most important is we do have we have 5 applications for board membership. And actually, I think it's really 7 applications, and we're going to have 3 open seats. So I need to, what I would like to suggest is that we have 2 or 3 members gather as a subcommittee and to review those applications. We have a longstanding policy within our, that was adopted by the board, I don't know, probably 15 years ago, that really lays out what we're looking for in terms of board members, like, you know, making sure we're representative of the types of businesses that are here. And so I can certainly provide the whole council or the whole board with that information, but we do need to submit.
There's 7 applicants, and I think, does that include?
Yes, the 7 is going to include
Kevin and Andrea?
those guys.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's the 7. The 3 spots,
Yes.
they've always been open? Like, how long have they been?
2 of them.
One Rick?
Yes, one of them is Rick, and
Yeah.
then 2 of them is taking us to a different level. Our bylaws say we can be anywhere between 5 and 11 people. So we've been at 7, so this would take us to 9. We can go more if we want. And that's maybe something that the committee discusses and comes back to the
How many
council.
people are on the board right now? 7?
6 now because Rick is
Okay.
termed off.
Does the 6 include
7.
Kevin and Andrea?
No,
Okay,
right. As technical board members, right,
Right.
Okay.
they're not included.
now both of you want to rejoin, is
Yeah,
that correct?
correct.
Okay, so there's
No, we have to apply.
6 now, Rick's gone. We're gonna add 3,
Correct.
okay. And
Add
there's,
Include,
You.
yeah, and there's 7 applicants for
Right.
those, well, there's 5 applicants for those 2 spots.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
No,
It doesn't
it
matter.
doesn't matter.
right.
I think it's better to say 7 to 3.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
7 applicants for 3.
7
spots.
applicants for 3 spots,
Yeah.
okay.
Right. Right. And, I took a quick look. Don't actually know. I don't think I know any of the applicants. But that's why, you know, we want to give it to the board to take a look at, which has been the tradition of the board, and then we take those the recommendations.
Well, I'm happy to be on that subcommittee.
Okay.
Um,
And I would suggest maybe Travis, since he's the VP.
Yeah, Karen.
You're here.
and
I always thought it was when you weren't here that you got put on committee.
Really, that's true.
I can tell you that having gone through the process for the library board,
Mm,
that was a different interviewing process. But you actually had a sponsor. Somebody sponsored you to join, and then there were at least 2 different people interviewed you.
Yeah.
And, you know, then you got presented in front of the committee and the whole committee had to approve.
Yep.
So that was a little bit different process than
Yep.
the other committees in town.
Yes.
Could I raise a question? Forgive me for maybe going a bit backwards, but going from 7 to 9, just obviously that's gonna, you don't have a quorum today, so.
Right.
You're
Mhm.
creating a higher quorum number.
That's pretty rare though, that we.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the
rare that we
first
don't
time. I
have a
think it's the
don't-
quorum.
first
I think it's
time.
the first time. that-
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just questioning, it really
To verification.
probably depends on the quality of your candidates.
It
Yeah.
does.
At the
Yes.
time
Mhm.
Jump.
to
Good
jump.
job.
Not for
I
me.
would say yes, if you've got stellar candidates.
Right.
Yeah, and I think we can take a look. I mean, I certainly was just surprised by the interest. I mean,
Yeah.
this was, I mean, Karen mentioned this to me, and really, like, I mean, I almost was, wondered if something brought it on or something.
It's a very elite group.
I
One around the handshake.
Yeah.
We're just under the radar.
But I certainly, I hate the thought of turning people away who want to get
Yeah.
involved.
Right.
And I tend to think if they're good candidates, it only adds to the,
Right.
get other expertise, I think business owners are always helpful,
Yep.
So I'm not opposed to it. If they're strong candidates.
Okay.
And just looking down the road a little bit, I think two of us actually drop off next year.
Next December.
So Jim and I both
Term-
came on at the same
term out.
time. We would both term out next
Right,
December of 26.
so it might not be 9 for very long.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you need board action to move from 7 to 9?
I don't think we do because the bylaws specifically allow it.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I think we've floated between 7 and 9, between 5 and 9 over the years.
So I can send an email to Alan and Travis.
Okay.
Schedule something. I assume
Okay.
we can meet in person or Zoom
Sure.
if we want,
And I'll package the info
Is that
together.
something that we come to, or is it just the board?
I might suggest you guys meet privately.
Okay. Yep, that's fine.
Yeah, just,
Are you at liberty to share names?
I would if I remembered them. That's because since there were 5 of them and they submit some detailed, information, they've already submitted their, materials. So I would give that to the subcommittee, but because that's the thing, I didn't want to have people's applications sort of discussed.
Mhm.
Rather
Yeah.
have some current review. Plus the nominating procedure does call for anybody who's not selected stays on the list for a year. So they would be on the list,
Oh, for December,
yeah,
if we wanted to bring them on.
right.
Okay.
Okay, so if that makes sense to everyone,
I'll send an email to Travis and Alan.
right, and I will forward, I'll tell you what, I will forward to you the applications.
Great.
And the one thing I suspect isn't in the application is because the application's geared toward a different type of board. So I will make sure that if they represent an industry, I'll try to find that out and say this person is in X industry.
Do they not have their profession listed on the application?
I'm trying to remember. I'm not sure if they do.
If it's the regular town application, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So that's why we may need, and maybe that comes out during an interview process.
Yeah, because I think that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
We don't need another banker.
Let's just do a search.
You're right.
Right.
No, we don't need another banker. From Evergreen Farms Road.
We don't need anybody else.
Piper Shores, nonprofit category winner, Piper Shores Sustainability Collaborative. This is through EcoMain's Eco Excellence Awards.
Oh, yeah.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Breaking news.
And then in terms of workshop priorities, I did make some small suggestions based on the workshop, and I just want to make sure that I'm relatively on target. If not, let me know, because we sort of ended it fast and we didn't, I'm not sure if we came to consensus on this, but housing, it's in red underneath the that last page of the budget pack of the package. And 1 through 4 already there. This 2025 update was really about adding housing is an economic development strategy. So that would be an addition. And then for 2025, the types of things that we'd be working on, we want to do the competitiveness assessment. We still need to develop the key performance indicators, and we are certainly updating the baseline growth report for rate of growth check-in for next year. And on the housing piece, we've put together a fairly substantial piece of information on housing, including pulling all the housing policies from the comp plan. And so we'll be really packaging that, not new policy, but just here where we are.
John is our council liaison. Who's the backup?
I wonder if we have backup.
I'm just,
I think long range planning is one of the few that has a backup.
John's usually.
John's
good about
quite-
fulfilling his
yeah,
John's here.
yeah, no, I'm not thinking of that. What I'm thinking of is if housing is a big priority, it would be great to have somebody like Council Fellows. He's got some background there.
Yeah, it's
John.
been,
No,
tagged
Yeah,
with
that's what I'm saying.
what do they call it, on the goals, I forget.
The superstar, what was the
Yeah.
word? I can't remember the word.
Champion.
Champion,
Yes.
yes.
Council champion.
Yeah.
And Bill Donovan is the liaison to Housing Alliance, so.
Right.
I'm gonna pull Karen in and I'm pleased to have any of your voices part of that conversation too on the housing.
Corey.
If you will.
Corey's very, very smart.
So with this represents at least, some of what we accomplished there, that we don't need to vote on it, but just reasonably, do these things make sense to you?
Yes.
And then last was, just to follow up on the all board summit, we talked a little bit about it, actually probably before the meeting started, just chatting. Tom was correct. It might have been not as well attended as the 2023 one, but we certainly had broad representation. And I think that there was a general understanding of what the council goals are. I think what the council was asking the committees to do is say, this is what we're thinking. You tell us where you fit in on this. And perhaps that's something we can do in March, is really take a look at that and roll up our sleeves and say, you know what, this is how we can provide you both information and feedback on policy with respect to these items. Because some of the detailed items under each category, as Tom said, they may not say economic development, but they are clearly within our wheelhouse.
And I can just say, I'm sorry, I apologize if I'm repeating myself from the beginning, but I attended, Alan attended. We were the two members of SEDCO there. I think there was about 30 people. Again, it was not a nice day. It had been
To say the least.
it had been a storm all day. So I think that could very clearly have impacted it. But Tom and John Anderson made a wonderful presentation. I thought was very informative on Tom, mostly on the staff goals, John Anderson, then on the council goals. Then there was sort of I would say, an open discussion where everyone was invited to. First everyone introduced themselves and what committee they were on, but then it was just people were asked to speak up on issues. Is the town supporting them? What could the town do better? There was how can the committees work together more? There was some suggestions made for resources the town could make for new committee members for any board in terms of policies and meeting procedures and but it was, I mean, trying to think, I thought Transportation Committee was very well represented. Scarborough by local, Planning Board.
Incidentally, were they there under false pretenses? They seemed confused.
No,
Who's that?
they were invited because the longstanding,
We're there for.
buy local
board
wasn't
meeting.
actually invited. But several of the members of the chamber committee serve on buy local, so I think they felt like they were representing both. But in fact, the chamber is there because one, they have an appointed council liaison, so we include them in this, plus they're part of the vision
Yeah, sure.
committee, which originally started it.
No, I just mentioned that because one of them, Jesse, I think, made some mention that thought they were there for a board meeting or some such thing.
No,
Yeah.
no, we've mentioned it several times at the regular chamber meeting. That there was going to be the all board summit, and this is why you're here.
There
So-
does seem to be a bit of new energy in that buy local group.
Yeah.
There's going to be a reboot
Yep.
later this month.
Yep, Magda is our representative on that committee, on that board, so next week. Mhm.
Yeah, no, so I thought it was great. I think it was, as with the last one, I think it was. It's just good to know that there's other, work being done, and as always, you kind of leave. Knowing that there's a lot of shared goals between the committees. So,
If I could just throw in a comment, if I'm not mistaken, last year there was more seat assignments,
Correct, we assigned people.
and I personally enjoyed that because I got to meet chairs of other committees that I normally would not come in contact with. So to be introduced to them, to understand what they were doing, I found value in that.
Yeah.
Um,
yeah, I think
and so
it did seem like there was,
It was clicky.
like it was clicky.
Yeah.
Clicky
Yeah.
this year.
And in 23, we did do that, and then this year with weren't sure how many people were actually gonna come because of the weather, and we just abandoned that because people were complaining in 2023 about not being able to choose their seat, and now,
Mhm.
yes, there's always,
I can't make everybody.
There's always-
Never.
yes,
Or
yes.
everybody.
But I do think that's part of the goal, is to get people to work together. But I do think that's the leftover question is, we do this summit, and then what's the follow-up? And I don't know that we've had good follow-up on, well, who did something, who worked with somebody else, type of thing. And so maybe
Next year, there could be a presentation or a little speech from two
Right,
members who did
right.
collaborate.
Sure. And I do think this year the council, and Tom, help me characterize this, they very much want the committees to take their lead from the council goals. Is that a fair?
That's certainly what council leadership has voiced, that they would like the committees to really be aware and drive hard on the council's stated goals. And I push back a bit saying, yeah, that makes perfect sense, but by the same token, I don't want to limit committees kind of grassroots freelancing a little bit.
Yes.
We shouldn't dictate entirely what they do.
Right.
Let them have a bit of
And,
autonomy.
and some committees aren't really focused on what council goals are.
Well, these goals are broad enough that there's something there for everyone.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that may be something that I would suggest that the council decide how they want that follow-up to occur, and we're happy to send it out to the distribution list, but if council wants direct feedback, if we want to put that out, that everybody should take a look at these goals, and
You're saying the distribution list for the all board summit?
yes.
Yeah, now that they're adopted, if you would, just to say, here they are. They're
Right.
changed, they're adopted.
But I think that's the next question. What are we asking the committees to do with them?
Well, I think my tact will be to use my staff that serves as support to these major committees. To work with the committee chairs to force a conversation early, this month or next month. around where do we think we fit.
Okay. All right, sort of what we're gonna do in March. Okay. That's it. Ooh, how that start?
Good.
Does anyone else have anything to discuss?
I had a couple comments. One is and believe it or not, I read the agenda on the
I believe it.
CEA strategy and, but I knew I wouldn't be awake for last night's council.
You'll be waiting the Celtics game.
Yes, I will be. Actually, I'll be at the Cross Arena tonight for the Scarborough boys against South Portland. So, I read the CEA strategy and when Karen was, setting it up as the point of discussion. I think Scarborough was ahead of things in the fact that we are considering a CEA strategy for housing.
Hmm.
And to set up the process, proactively set up the process, I think is really speaks well to the community. Because every affordable housing project in every town across the state go through their approvals and then they come back to the table saying we need. And so it only makes sense that we have a process in place. And in reading it last night, that is, and you just, as you described it, that's really all it is just a
Process.
process.
Right.
So I thought that was, I wanted to say it, but you jumped to the next
Oh,
item.
sorry.
And then the last thing was I was amazed that the All Board Summit meeting was actually held because I was at Sunday River and it was a full-blown snowstorm on Thursday night. So
Yeah.
I was really I didn't realize that things had improved that much in Scarborough last Thursday.
Presque Isle takes a lot.
Yeah.
Not many snow days at town hall.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the only dangerous part was the parking lot.
Make sure Tom's never superintendent, there'll never be a snow day again.
Yeah,
That's it, Karen.
we talked a lot about that the day before. Like, do we cancel it? Do we not cancel it?
Just to follow up on what you just said, Scarborough being ahead of the game, I went to it was a Portland Chamber, the Greater Portland Chamber's Government Affairs meeting last month at Pretty Flaherty, and they had, I don't know, 6 or 7 state reps come and meet with this group, and none were from Scarborough, but there was, I think Yarmouth, Portland, South Portland. I mean, just some southern Maine, obviously, Greater Portland, obviously. And it was amazing to me. It got quite heated. The developers that were trying to do the project in South Portland, Brick, Yard South.
Yard South.
Yard South were there. And they were simply livid. And I don't really know why they were taking it out on the state reps, but they were. And one state rep made the mistake of saying, well, you tell us what you need. Do you need more money? And man, the developers from Yard South, they just went off. They said that is such a ignorant thing to say. There's plenty of money. It is the towns that are absolutely stopping housing from happening. It said, we put so much time in planning, we had community meetings, and then, there's NIMBYism and the towns and the zoning, the towns won't back the developers. It was quite heated. And, in fact, the moderator had to say, can we please remember to be respectful to these people? I mean, it was really, so there is a lot of anger out there from, I think, developers who just, put a lot of money into these projects and then at the end, they don't go forward, but they were saying that it's the towns and so the fact that we're trying to be proactive, I think is good.
Just a question in regard to our involvement with the Gorham ED group. because we kind of pulled out of the Turnpike Connector project, is our joint meeting now over? Or are we looking to see if there's other ways that we can get synergy?
Well, I think there's other ways to get synergy. And I think the first meeting was much more general about ways
Yeah.
to cooperate. The second one, just because of timing, wound up being, that certainly that they were most passionate about that project. But I'm not sure that from a staffing perspective that Kevin and I saw this was as an ongoing piece, but I think we need to circle back.
Okay,
So whatever the board's pleasure.
I mean, I
Forum over West or South Portland or your counterparts and all those other.
right. I
It's a
mean, there's
design,
other-
yeah.
I think to your point, I mean, there was conversations of with the
Continuing.
connector coming. Would there be,
Right.
because of the area of Scarborough that it would affect,
Right,
could they continue to meet with,
right.
Yeah.
so I don't, I mean,
I do like the idea of meeting with other
Mhm.
groups, the other towns. I think that's actually something that.
I will
makes a
say, I
lot of
think there is
sense.
something unique in Quorum. Being a bit contrarian there for my comment, but their vision for South Quorum developing mixed use and our vision for North Scarborough are
Slightly different.
somewhat in conflict.
Yeah.
And so I think staying close and having a conversation with them makes sense. I don't think that we have those sort of. Saco might be an interesting one to connect with because they're doing a lot on Route 1 just south of us that is clearly impacting us from a traffic
Mhm.
point of view. There doesn't appear to be much, I don't know, the development that's occurring there seems not well planned in my opinion. That's something we should probably deal with on the staff level, but there may be opportunities for you to meet with your counterpart there as well. Just on the CEA, just a quick observation. I was reminded, and Karen and I think share the same opinion. Our hand was forced in the first instance when this was minted 5 or 7 years ago. At the time, we didn't think we needed it, and this was just a reminder that we would be just as well not having a policy, frankly. Having said that, where this thing ended up, I think is decidedly different than kind of the objective the first time. First time was really to put barriers up and to stop CEAs for economic development. It was right on the heels of the towns. It was under a very particular regime of the town council that was their really kind of stated goal almost, that it was intended to be restrictive. This time, where we ended up seemed to be far more welcoming, and that thresholds were, I think, very thoughtfully done. They were not hard thresholds, so it's very much more permissive, and I think it's suggestive of kind of how the council views at least housing CEAs.
Yeah, I think it's,
It's way more complicated than it needs to be.
Yeah.
They have a propensity to overcomplicate everything.
yeah, yeah. And it's just the difference between, I think they're trying to walk this line of, we want to, some people, not just on the council, but some people want to discourage them. And some people want to be agnostic, like, no, let's just see them. And we make the case by case. And no matter how much we say that the CEA policy does nothing except set up really a robust process to get the council information about the project. And I think that's what you see. And it is a 6 to 7 month process. Let's not kid ourselves. And then again, there are those who think that, well, if you have a policy, then people are going to come forward. And then you're going to feel like you have to approve them. And that is not what this policy does. So there's a layer of desire that the policy does not address. So that's where the council has to make some decisions on their piece. And they may come back and change the CEA and put that in the CEA, but they need to make some broad decisions about what they're looking at. And I think Scarborough, last time I looked at building permits just for this past year, we are 280, little north of 280 building permits for residential units for last year, which put us way above anybody else in the state. So we beat Portland out of that, although I haven't checked December for Portland.
I was with that last year.
I think I sent you a chart.
Oh, I'm sure you. Sure. Portland's a mess.
Yeah, there's like every other town in the state is down here, and then
Gorman, Saco, or,
nope,
yeah,
not for last year. Year before, I think they beat us. But last year our rate of growth has on the surface, what, 260 units. You can do a little more, a little less, depending on a couple of criteria. And then we were at 280 for last year. I think 281 or something like that. Which is a lot of housing.
All right.
Now we're over.
Now we're over.
We can't vote to adjourn, so.